Okay, good evening everybody, and we're starting Bezrat Hashem a new series tonight on Mesillat Yesharim, the path of the just. The reason why I wanted to learn path of the just is it personally had a very big effect on me when I was getting closer to Yiddishkeit and wanting to become, I guess you call it, more observant or closer to Hashem. And long story, I'm not going to go into it now, but I read a novel by a famous Yiddish author about someone who had fallen very far away from his Yiddishkeit, and he gets himself into a terrible mess in his life. And his wife, finds his wife being unfaithful to him, and he runs away. And cut a long story short, one of the things that sort of the hero of this novel, what supports him, what gives him some kind of encouragement and brings him back, is Mesillat Yesharim. So I was fascinated to know, what was this book, Mesillat Yesharim, just from this novel. And it's interesting because the author of this novel writes at the end of the book something like a government health warning. What do I mean by that? It means that he realized he'd written, the author is a Jew, very famous Jewish author, I'm not going to mention him, but he was completely secular. He grew up as a frum Jew, went off the derech completely. And clearly, you're looking for Mesillat Yesharim, so if there's one up there, if not, then I guess you can share for this week. So the author of this novel was a totally secular Jew, grown up religious, and he'd clearly written this book and this character in this book, and he felt that he'd written it a little bit too well. So he says at the end something amazing. I've never seen any author ever do anything like this before. He says that the reader should understand that the author of this book does not agree with what the lead character has to say, and I thought, like as Shakespeare would say, methinks he doth protest too much. I mean, why? Obviously, there was something coming deep from, I believe, within his neshama, which he couldn't quite get to terms with, which was the fact that he turned his back on his Yiddishkeit and he created this character who'd done tshuva, who'd returned, and he just wanted to make sure that nobody reading the book would do tshuva as well, by writing this, as I call it, the government health warning on the packet. Well, anyway, he failed as far as I was concerned, because it did have a very strong effect on me. And when I picked up the book and read the introduction, and we're not going to do the introduction, I don't think we're going to go dive into chapter 1, but it's worth reading the introduction. And one of the things he says in the introduction is that you're not going to find in this book anything that you don't already know before. I thought, what does that mean? That's like an almost kind of why am I reading the book then? And basically, he says, because what you find in this book is things that you really already know, that everybody knows. Now, I just want to preface this by saying this is not a book that tries to demonstrate the existence of God or the truth of the Torah. That's more, I would say, in the realm of Derech Hashem. The Derech Hashem, if one would like to put it, is the Derech Hashem is Hashem's view of the world, and Mesillat Yesharim is how we approach Hashem. So the Derech Hashem does deal with the mitzvahs, with why God created the world, the idea of schar v'onesh, the idea of that Hashem wanted to be mativ, he wanted to do good, to the reason for the creation of man, v'chule, etc., etc. So he doesn't deal with that in Mesillat Yesharim at all. He starts off, the departure point is that he's speaking to religious Jews who believe in Hashem, who believe the Torah is true. But he says that to the extent that things are well known and self-evident to us, so to that exact same degree they become forgotten. Now, what does he mean by this? Let's conduct an experiment. Now, who's wearing a watch here tonight? Yeah, two, okay. So 2 people here. Now, who's good at mathematics? Okay, has anybody got a calculator? So, no, seriously, how long have you had your watch for?
A year and a half.
A year and a half, okay. you've had the watch for a year and a half. So, and how many times an hour do you look at your watch?
Probably 2 to 3.
So let's say 3 times an hour. Okay, here's the math. Now, 3 times an hour for a day is how long? 72 times a day, 3 times an hour. Let's say you're awake for. So let's get it 3 times an hour. And let's say you're awake for what? 10 hours, 12 hours. How long do you sleep? 8 hours, 6 hours?
7.
Sleep 7 hours. So that's 7 from 24 is. I can see you're as bad as math as me. It's 17. 17. Yeah, 17. 17, 24. You're 17 hours a day. You're looking at your watch 17 hours a day, and you look at it 3 times. So 3 times 17 is. I think we're going to need a calculator. Who's got a calculator here? You got a calculator? 3 times 17 is how much? 51. So you look at your watch 51 times a day, and you take off for Shabbos. So you've got 6 times 51 is how much? 6 times 51. So 306 times a week. And you've had it for how long? A week, year and a half. So it's 52, let's call it, and 25, let's call it 75. Call it 80, you've had it for 80 weeks. So 80 weeks, right? So 80 weeks times...
24,480.
You've looked at your watch around 24,000 times.
That's crazy.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, without looking, tell me what's written on the face of your watch.
The time.
No, I'm saying, does it have a name? Does it have...
No.
Exactly, has it got anything on the watch at all? Don't look.
Scratches.
It's got absolutely nothing on the watch at all. So I picked the wrong watch. Ah. Have you got a regular watch?
It's a smartwatch.
Everybody's got smartwatches. I think I'm going to have to give up with this example. Well, the point of this example is that usually when people have a normal watch, which I guess I'm going to have to retire this particular Marshall, did me very well up till now, but okay, everything has its time, is that people can look at a watch for 24,000 times and they won't be able to tell you what's written on their watch.
It's better when you see someone checking the time and then you ask them what the time is, they won't know.
The point is that unless a person, that's what I want to get to, unless a person focuses on something, it can be in front of his eyes and he can see it all of the time, 24,000 times, and he will not be able to recall it. This is one of the problems with Avodas Hashem, serving Hashem. We all know there's Hashem. We believe there's Hashem. We wouldn't be here in Or Sameach unless we believed. It's true. Belief is something which is constantly going up and down, but minimally the mere fact we're there proves that we believe there's a God and we believe the Torah is true. And yet how much of our time are we really sort of living, so to speak, with Hashem? How much of the time are we really aware of Hashem? And part of the avoda of Musa, which is really the Mesillat Yesharim is one of the classic works of Musa, is to bring to a person's attention that there's a God in the world and that we're living in his world. Because if person doesn't do that, then he may be frum, he may keep all the mitzvahs, he may do everything right, but in a fundamental way, he has no relationship with Hashem. So this is one of the things we're hoping to get out of Mesillat Yesharim, is to increase our contact with Hashem. And I think especially now it's very important because I think all of us feel in yeshivas that we owe a tremendous gratitude. We had a terrible tragedy today. 21 soldiers were killed in action. And I was thinking to myself, why is it that the number of 20, because there were so many, Hashem Yerachem, do we need that to impact us? Every single Jewish life that's lost, every day soldiers are being killed. And for every one of those soldiers, that's a tragedy that breaks their entire family. Young lives being cut short. And our responsibility here in the yeshiva is to take upon ourselves the responsibility that as much as we can is that we should put ourselves, have our mind on them, and in our davening and our learning, to understand that we are part of this process of protecting Klal Yisrael, and we have an important and a vital and hidden part to play, which makes it more difficult. And that's why I think now more than ever, it's very, very important that a person has to focus on his avodas Hashem and his ben adam lechaveru, the way he treats his fellow, because all of these things are contributing to the war effort. Again, it's something which is subtle. No, that's not the right word. It's something which is hidden, but it's extremely powerful. So, without more ado, I'd like to start Perek Aleph. I'm going to go through this with some of my own understandings and the more classical understandings as well. Please stop me if something's not clear.
Quick question. Why is Derech Eitz Chaim, the small sefer, also by the Ramchal, why is it in the back of the Mesillat Yesharim?
Why is it? I think it's, I don't know if it's in every, is it in every Mesillat Yesharim? I don't know. It's not in this one. It's a printing, I think it's just convenient. It's not, I don't think that the two Sfarim are not, I haven't learned Derech Eitz Chaim, but I think it's much more to do with Kabbalah. So, okay, so, the clarification, the biur of the klal, of the generality of chovas ha'adam ba'olamo, of the responsibilities, the obligations of a person ba'olamo. So I want to, before we go anywhere, to deal with this title. We're explaining what are the chovas ha'adam, the obligations of a person in his world. Now, what's your name? Yuda. So, if you look at the written Torah, you'll find absolutely no mention of rights. There's nothing about rights in the written Torah. Maybe in Torah Baal Peh there is, but Torah Shebiksav, the written Torah, there is no mention about what your rights are. Now, if you, who's American here? So we've got two Americans. So now obviously you'll know off by heart the Declaration of Independence, right? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, amongst which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Certain inalienable rights. So you see, if we would say that the Torah was the Declaration of Independence, so to speak, of the Jewish people, the founding document, the principles on which the Jewish people are going to steer their lives, and the same might be true of the American society. Here we have the foundation document of the Jewish people, the Torah, which has not one word about rights, and the very first line of the Declaration of Independence talks about rights. Now, if you think about it, really, rights and obligations meet in the middle. Meaning, let's say that we want to set up a country. You and I are going to be the joint presidents, and or maybe the only two members in the entire country, I don't know, but we want to, what we're going to do is we're going to, of course, we have to have a constitution. So, part of the constitution of our new country is that every Tuesday afternoon, Yaakov Asher Sinclair has the obligation to give to Yehuda Sales a jelly donut. Okay, that's part of the country. Every Tuesday afternoon, Yaakov Asher Sinclair has to give to Yehuda Sales a jelly donut. Now, we could frame that law in one of two ways. We could say that every Tuesday afternoon, Yehuda Sales has the right to receive a jelly donut from Yaakov Asher Sinclair, or we could write it as every Tuesday after Yaakov Asher Sinclair has the obligation. Thank you. The obligation to give Yehuda Sales a jelly donut. Now, if I play fair, we're going to get to the same place. Meaning, your rights meet where my obligations end, or really they overlap. To the extent that I have obligations, you don't need rights, and to the extent that you have rights, I don't need an obligation. They say they get to the same place, with one important exception. When you frame a constitution based on people's rights, you turn them into takers. And when you frame a constitution based on people's obligations, you turn them into givers. The Torah comes to turn the human being into a giver, which is essentially to be B'Tselem Elokim. Hashem created man in the image of God. Just as God is a giver, God is the ultimate giver. You can't give anything to God. If you could give anything to God, he wouldn't be God. Because axiomatically, God is that existence who is totally perfect in every way. And if I could give him anything, that meant that particular thing, whatever it was, he didn't have before, which means in some way, God forbid, I made God more perfect by him now having this thing that he didn't have before. So it's axiomatic that we can't give anything to God. God is the ultimate giver. But to the extent that man was created to be B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God, which means that just like God is a giver, we're supposed to be givers. Rav Eliyahu Dessler identifies in a must-read, I hate that expression, but it's an essay that everybody should learn, and maybe we will do, an essay called Kuntras HaChesed, which literally means like a pamphlet, or I guess Kuntras is a pamphlet of kindness. Rav Dessler identifies that there are actually, at the root of the human personality, there are two motivations. Everything in your life comes from two motivations. There is the motivation to give and the motivation to take. You can boil down at any one particular moment, if you'll notice that it's an interesting exercise to do. You'll realize that at any given moment in your life, you're being motivated by one of those two motivations. You're either in giving mode or taking mode. And they swap very quickly from one to the other. But they're totally discrete, he says. A person's either giving or he's taking. And as I said, it can change on a flip, in a split second from, in other words, hidden with every act of giving, sometimes there's an act of taking, which is, what am I taking? I'm taking the kavod, I'm taking the glory. Here, I'm such a good guy giving. I remember my Rebbe told me once he was learning very late in the yeshiva in Baltimore one night, and so I don't know, 12:30, 1 o'clock, and somebody came in. He said he found it very difficult to resist the temptation to look around and see who it was watching him being such a tzaddik. So, okay, on the one hand, he's giving, he's learning Torah. It's the biggest gift you can give to the world. You're creating, for that reason, the whole world was created. Moshe Chaim says that if there was one, God forbid, one split second where there wasn't Torah being learnt in the world, learns it from a posik, Chukos Shemayim im lo brisi Shemayim im lo brisi Yomam v'Layla Chukos Shemayim v'Aretz lo samti. Were it not for my bris of day and night, the bris is the bris of the Torah. Were it not for that bris of the Torah being learned, Chukos Shemayim v'Aretz lo samti, I would never have placed the laws of heaven and earth. Meaning the natural world is dependent on the existence of the Torah. If the Torah, God forbid, wasn't being learned, the Moshe Chaim says, then the world would return to an earlier stage of tohu vavohu, formless and emptiness. But Baruch Hashem, because the world is round and there's always going to be day and night, somebody somewhere is always learning Torah. Torah is the ultimate gift. But says Rav Dessler, the whole human personality is based on these two desires. The desire to take is the root behind all wars or immorality. All bad midas eventually go back to the desire to take. And all good midas, all good parts of a person, come from the desire to give. Justice, kindness, obviously, sympathy, humility. All of the good things in a person's personality can be traced back to that root desire. Now, by the by, he says something also very interesting, which is that the desire to take, the Yetzer Hara, has a very interesting aspect to it, that it's actually not based at all on the thing itself. I think we've all had this experience. So let's go around the room. All of you have got some kind of hobby probably. Or what's your hobby? Working, all right. That's not a very easy one.
I started learning guitar. So.
Guitar, okay. So presumably, if you like guitars, how many guitars do you have?
One.
Only one. How many would you like to have?
Maybe two.
Okay, you mean you don't suffer from GAS?
What's that?
Guitar acquisition syndrome?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. But I mean, we could supply. You could take out guitar and you could put watches. I mean,
How about with books?
Books?
To acquire a lot of books.
Yeah, but books are a bit different because every book is really different. What I'm, but what's your hobby?
I like nature.
Nature. Okay, so probably there are all kinds of nature equipment and stuff that you need, hiking boots and stuff. All the
You can always go to a million different places. It's always
a million different places. Okay, so all right, very good. You know, so and what's your hobby? Surfing. So you probably want to get a better surfboard, right, or a faster surfboard. So I think everybody's, maybe not everybody, I'm talking for myself, I know, I'm not going to tell you what my particular, but whatever it is, let's say for the sake of argument, and it's not, let's say you're into watches. So, you know, and you save up all your money and you manage to buy yourself whatever it is, but really you would like a Rolex. And you know exactly the Rolex that you want, you know, the model, and you know, and you go to the shop and you look at it, and you know, you're going to be so, if only I had that Rolex, everything in my life would be wonderful. If only I had that surfboard, everything would be wonderful. If only I went to such and such place, everything would be wonderful. Even if only I could buy that Les Paul 65, then everything. And this, I don't know if you noticed, but it becomes almost like an obsession that won't leave you alone. You kind of walk around, and it pops into your head to the extent that, you know, you can be in the middle of davening and you can sort of go, Baruch Ato ha Rolex. You know, it just pops into your mind in the most unpleasant and the inappropriate times. And what happens? So okay, let's say you get you buy your new surfboard, or you buy your new guitar, and you know, you open it up and it's beautiful, and that's that sort of smell of new guitar as you open up the plush case and you take it out, and oh wow, you know, and then about a week later it's still very nice, but and 2 months later it's another guitar. And so what happened? The answer is, Rav Dessler explains, that the desire to take has got nothing to do with the object itself. The desire to take is based on the principle of taking what I don't have and moving it within my perimeter. The desire to engulf and devour, to consume. And it's the feeling of the consumption, or the dream of the consumption, which is the delectable part, so to speak. It's the desire to take possession. And of course, once I have it, then of course it loses that beautiful taste because I already have it. And he says this is why people have immoral relationships, because of this idea. And once they have whatever it is, their desire, then it palls very quickly. It becomes stale. And this is true with relationships, God forbid, and it's true with guitars, and it's true with surfboards, and it's true with nature, and it's true with anything you might want to mention. Because the desire to take is really something which cannot be satiated, cannot be satisfied. It's the green-eyed monster that mocks the meat it feeds upon. It constantly wants more and more and more. And when a person gets hooked into taking, he will never be happy. These two are the root motivations of the human personality. And as we said, Judaism is framed as a series of obligations and not as a series of rights, because rights make a person into a taker. And taking is the root of all evil. So that's why Bia Klal Chovas Ha'odam, we're interested in, a person has to explore, what are my obligations? Why my obligations? Because obligations make me a giver. And being a giver is what Hashem wants me to be. That's what He created me to be. And that's what makes me happy. People don't realize this. People think that acquiring is what makes them happy. The reverse is actually true. The reverse is actually true. What makes a human being really happy is to give. Because basically when he gives, he's fulfilling the purpose of his creation. He's aligned himself with the purpose of the Creator. And he feels that deep down in his neshama, this is what I should be doing. This is the right thing to do. And I'm not just talking about Jews here, non-Jews as well. Why is it that you see that people, multi-billionaires, suddenly have a desire to give all their money away? Because that touches a very deep chord in the human being. So, the next thing is, I want to talk about the explanation of the obligations of a person, ba'olamo, in his world. Now, what is his world, ba'olamo? We're going to go into this maybe a little bit deeper later on, but I'm going to leave this for now. I'm going to come back to this idea. Okay, let's start in proper. Yesod HaChasidus v'shoresh ha'avoda ha'tamima hu she'izborei v'yis'ames etzel ha'odam ma chovosa b'olamo u'ma tzorich she'yosim ma'bata magmosa b'chol asher hu omel kol yimei chayov. Yesod HaChasidus, the foundation of Chasidus. Now, Chasidus doesn't mean the movement that the Baal Shem Tov started in the 17th century. Chasidus means going beyond the letter of the law. Noach was a tzaddik. Abraham is the pillar of chesed. Noach was a tzaddik. Noach tzaddik ish tzaddik b'dorosov in his generation. What is a tzaddik? A tzaddik is somebody who does what he's supposed to do. Noach looked all after all the animals in the ark, but he would have been perfectly happy if there could have been a robot who could have gone around and done all the cleaning and all the feeding of the animals. It wouldn't have bothered him. Avram Avinu is the midah of chesed. Avram Avinu, even after the third day of the bris milah, when he was in a lot of pain, was concerned, was hurting more from the fact that he couldn't do the mitzvah of hachnasas orchim, and Hashem made the day very hot. Rashi tells us he took the sun out from its nartik, from its scabbard, from its sheath, made it extra hot so nobody would come and bother him. Hashem saw that Avraham Avinu was in more pain from the fact that he couldn't do the mitzvah of chesed, even though there was nobody for the chesed to be done to. Not like Noach, where there's nothing to do, so that's fine. No. If I can't do chesed, it pains me. And therefore Hashem sent him these three angels, these malachim, who looked like human beings, merely so that he could do the mitzvah of chesed. A chosid is somebody who goes beyond the letter of the law. A chosid who wants to do for the sake of doing. A tzaddik is somebody who does what he needs to do. Maybe we should have actually started off by I don't know where it is in this one. Up to the chapter of Nikiyut, cleanliness, can't find it. The whole of the Mesillat Yesharim is based on a brisa. Yeah, it's a brisa in Avodah Zarah. Mikonam Rabbi Pinchas ben Yoel. And Pinchas ben Yoel says, Torah mevi lidei zehirus. The learning of Torah brings to zehirus. Zehirus is translated variously as watchfulness. Zehirus basically means think. Zehirus is the midah of to think about what you're doing. We're going to talk about this in some detail. The Yetzer Hara doesn't want you to think too much. Just says, do it now, go for it. Zehirus, watchfulness or carefulness, mevi lidei zerizus, that brings to the hands of literally of alacrity, doing things, doing mitzvahs, running to do mitzvahs. Zerizus mevi lidei nikius, that brings to the level of nikius. Now, nikius means cleanliness, literally. It means freeing a person frees himself from his aveiras, and he's doing everything it says in the Shulchan Aruch. if any of us get to that level, we'll be doing very, very well. Now there are other levels above this, and these are the level up to here is it's tzidkus, what we would call being righteous, being a tzaddik. Being a tzaddik means doing what it says in the Shulchan Aruch. Then nikios may be delay precious. Cleanliness, spiritual cleanliness leads to precious, which means separating yourself from things which are be'etzem, essentially allowed, but may, God forbid, lead a person away, astray. Precious separation may be lidei tahara, that brings to purity. Tahara may be lidei chasidus, that brings to chasidus, which is, I guess you call saintliness. Chasidus midei lidei anova, that brings us to humility. You see how far humility is up there. It takes very, very difficult to be truly humble. Anova midei lidei yiras chet, and anova, humility leads a person to the fear of sin. Now, this is a whole discussion in itself. There are two kinds of fear. There's a fear called yiras ha'onesh, which is the fear of punishment. And the Rambam says that's only fitting for people on a fairly low level. And halavai, we should get to that level. And that is a person doesn't do an avera because he doesn't want to get hurt. Yiras ha'chet is not that a person is worried about getting punished. He's worried that he may have something he might have done something which is going to make him in some way separate from Hashem, to whatever small degree that is, and that bothers him. And yiras chet may be de kedusha. The fear of sin brings a person to kedusha, holiness. Kedusha may be de ruach hakodesh, and that brings the level of ruach hakodesh. And ruach hakodesh may be lidei tchias hamesim, all the way up the ladder to a state where a person is able to be revive the dead. The Mesillat Yesharim doesn't get to that. He doesn't go to Tchias HaMesim. I think he just gets to Ruach HaKodesh. So these are the steps that we're going to be talking about. So the first step along the ladder is already looking our trajectory. Even at the beginning, he's talking about Yesod HaChasidus. That's the very thing he starts off with. The foundation of Chasidus means that's where a person should have a desire to aim for. To aim for that. Now, I once asked my Rebbe, most of us will have a very hard time getting to tzidkus. Why do we bother to learn the rest of this book? Why don't we just stop at Nikios? Why are we learning about all these things that, for sure, in our generation, I can't say for sure, but I would say almost definitely there's nobody in our generation. Again, I can't say that for sure, but almost nobody in our generation which will get to these higher levels of Chasidus. So why do we learn about them? So he gave me the following answer. There are two answers. Number one, the mere fact that you know certain these levels exist, what they consist of, makes you a different person. The mere fact that you are cognizant that these levels of spirituality, of closer to Hashem exist, that makes you a more spiritual person, even if you'll never get there in your life. And the other answer is that it's true that most of us will never reach these levels, but it's possible for a brief period of time, for maybe even a split second, that we will be able to raise ourselves up and touch one of those levels, even though we can't stay there, we can't hold at that level. And for that, it's going to be worth learning about them. But clearly, Yesod HaChasidus, that's where our eyes should be focused. Okay, so Yesod HaChasidus, v'shoresh ha'avoda, and the root. And I'd like to say here that Yesod is something, and Shoresh are really two different. Yesod is something which is, inanimate. A foundation is something which is stone, which is unforgiving, which is, fixed. And a shoresh, a root, is something which is dynamic, which grows. So what is the understanding of Yesod HaChasidus for shoresh ha'avoda ha'temima? So there are really two parts to service of Hashem. One is we all work within the code of the halacha. The code of the halacha, in a sense, is fixed. It's true, halacha will change as new things come into the world. But we have a Shulchan Aruch, we have a poskim, we have, let's say, a spectrum of opinions, but usually those spectrum of opinions apply to fairly narrow circumstances. Nobody will tell you that you can cook on Shabbos. Nobody's going to be able to tell you that you can eat bacon, God forbid, unless, of course, you're starving on a desert island. The Torah is, to a certain extent, a yesod. It's fixed. But on the other hand, there also has to be, each individual person has to find his own way, his own shorish, like a shorish which grows, a root that grows. So a person has to find within that the strictures of halacha his own personal expression. This is very, very important. Sometimes people think that being an Orthodox Jew is to be like an automaton, to be a robot. Nothing could be further than the truth. Hashem made us all tremendously different. Why? If he really wanted robots, then why don't we just, come out a cookie cutter out of the factory as all pre-wired and ready to go? No. The human personality is so varied, so many different people with different likes and different dislikes and different ways of seeing things. And we're all supposed to be using all of these talents and conquering these deficiencies to serve Hashem better. So that's the other part. The Aron HaKodesh was metal on the outside and on the two outsides, and it was wood in the inside, a level of wood. Wood is again something organic, and metal, gold, is something which is inert. So that's the Aron HaKodesh carried the luchos, carried the Torah. So to speak, a Talmid Chacham has to be somebody, and a Jew who wants to aspire has to have these two elements. He has to be rigid. No, I don't want to say rigid. Has to be rigorous in his application, his diktuk, his care in keeping all the mitzvahs down to their tilim, to their smallest details. And on the other hand, he has to also find a way to infuse his avodas Hashem with his own personality. And God forbid, a person who tries to do a lobotomy on his personality will find himself very unhappy, and for sure that's not what Hashem wants. Hashem wants each one of us to serve him in our own individual, unique way. So that's a shorish, the yesod, the fixed part of things, the chasidus, the shorish avoda hatamima. The way you get this avoda tamima is to expand, to grow your shorish. Hu sheyizbora v'yis ames. That is, and we'll finish with this, that a person has to clarify and yisames, literally make true. It's from emet. He has to clarify and make true, eitzel ha'odam, ma chovoso ba'olamo. Again, we are back to those two words we said. What are his obligations in his world? Uma tzarich shiosim mabato. And what he needs to fix is mabato or magmoso. Now these are two very similar words. Magma means something like target. Mabat is a target. Magmoso is like, I think, another word for target.
So it's here, aiming for and how it can be achieved.
Oh, aiming for and how it can be very good, because basically mabato and magmoso are what we would call in English strategy and tactics in everything that he does in his labor in all the days of his life. Where he has to work out where he needs to get to. He has to clarify and make that true. Where mabato means what's the difference between strategy and tactics before we go on?
So it says here, you need to work out what you're aiming for and then how you can achieve it.
Exactly. Strategy is where I want to get to. Tactics is how I get there. So a person has to work out a strategy, meaning where am I trying to get to? And then two, how do I get there? But before we get there, forgive the pun, he said before, that a person has to make clear and make true. What does he mean by these two words? He has to make clear, make true what are his obligation in his world, and to what he's going to focus his strategy and his tactics, as we said before. Yizborer vis ames. So Yizborer, I want to say, something which is clear is something which is talking about logic. Meaning, a person has to first of all make clear what it is what his obligations are in this world. And the obligations of clearly are therefore, his obligation is to be a Jew. His obligation is to follow Hashem, to follow the Torah. So he has to make that true to himself, that there's a God, that there's a Torah. He has to, as Rabbi Gottlieb would say, he has to verify. He has to do the historical verification of the Torah, or whatever he needs to do intellectually to make his mind comfortable. As Rabbi Kellerman put it, that he gives himself permission to believe. However, intellect is not enough. A person lives in two worlds. One is the world of the intellect, and the other is what I like to call an emotional reality. The emotional reality is that intellectually I understand, put it this way, a person can intellectually maybe conceive of the ideas of God and Judaism, but unless he inculcates that into himself, it's quite possible for him to drive out of Orsamech, God forbid, and go and find, the nearest Big Mac, non-kosher Big Mac. Because it's not part of his life, it's not part of who he is. Yisames means that it's the emotional reality by which I live. That's the reality in which I live. Let me just finish out and I'll explain, let you speak. In other words, people tend to think that belief is something which is you either believe or you don't believe. It's an on-off position, or maybe even if it's not an on-off position, but it's some kind of dimmer. And really that's a better way of looking at it. What I want to say is that Emunah is a midah. Emunah is something which is, let's give an example. There's a midah called kas. A midah, how do you translate midah into English? A personality trait. That's why I think it's connected with the idea of to make something true. To make it, you have to make it true. You have to live within that truth. You have to intellectually understand it, and then you have to live within that truth that you've intellectually arrived at. And that's a separate process, because let's say, for example, there's a midah called kas. Kas means anger. So intellectually, a person could understand that to be an angry person is an extremely bad thing. But that won't stop him being a kason. It won't stop him being an angry person unless he takes positive, active steps to work on his midah. We've all heard this expression, to work on your midas, to take steps, to find emotional, spiritual exercises to change or modify your midot, your character traits. So just like a person needs to work, if he's, God forbid, has basically the midah of anger, he has to work on that. He has to find ways to improve his character. And it's something that can be done. So similarly, midah, there's a midah of emunah. Belief is not a light switch, but emunah is something which has to be constantly strengthened, or, God forbid, it can be weakened. And to that extent, I want to say we're living in, that's what he talked about, yisames. He has to make something clear. True. He has to live it out. He has to do things which strengthen his emunah. And one of those things is learning Torah. So that's what we're going to start off with. When a person learns Torah, and principally Chazal, which deal with the strengthening of emunah, then this is something which helps him. So that's what he needs. I think we're going to finish here, and you can ask some questions. Yesod Chasidus, we'll read it again. First of all, let's just sum up what we said. Be'er klal of avodas ha'odam b'olamah. The strict description of what are the general principles, the general categories of the obligation of a person in this world. We spoke about that. That's the title. The foundation, Yesod Chasidus, the foundation of Chasidus, V'shoresh ha'avoda ha'tamimo. Yesod is something fixed, Shoresh is something dynamic, is organic, is growing. Avoda tamimo, perfect service of Hashem as much as we can. Who she is borer, that a person has to intellectually clarify, vias ames, and live within that realm of his intellectual clarity. make it true for himself. Eitzel Adam, with regard to a person, ma choivaso b'olamo, what are his obligations in his world? And we didn't go into his world, and we'll do that next week, why it says his world. Why not the world? We'll start with that next week, please somebody remind me. Ba'olamo, his world. Ulama tzarech shiasim maboto, and to what he needs to focus his strategy, his end game, so to speak, umagmoso, and the technique by which he'll get there. B'chol asher hu omal omeil, in everything that he labors hard all the days of his life. And also, I want to go into this word. What does it talk about? Hard work, laboring hard. The nature of a person is basically, Chazal say, Adam la'omal yulad. A person is born to work hard, which I think is what your hobby was. Anyway, we'll leave it here. If you have questions.
Yeah, for a person that leans more emotionally, is it more important for him to focus on serving Hashem emotionally rather than intellectually? Or which route does he take?
A person has to, well, that's really what I was saying, that there are the kind of, there's the matrix, which is the Torah. The Torah gives you the framework of life, and within that, it's up to you to bring your own personal, emotional self to fulfill the mitzvahs in the way which is individually and uniquely yours. Whatever that may be, what sort of the chesed you want to do, or the way you like to learn Torah. I mean, here in Osamech, obviously we're giving people basic skills, but people go on and branch off into all different kinds of areas when they've got that foundation. In a sense, sort of, I guess, like I don't know if I want this to be put out to the world, but Osamech is like a remedial school. It's like a place where people who aren't privileged to have a solid, authentic Jewish education are able to catch up. And so therefore what is taught here are, the ground skills. But as you hopefully develop and grow in your Torah, you'll see that there's a natiyah. A person should learn, Chazal teach us, Masha libo chofetz, what his heart desires. So it's the two things again. There's the Torah there, which is, how do you say, like megalithic. It's a solid structure of itself, but within that there are infinite paths, depending on your personality, to be able to bring it to reality and fruition in a way which is going to satisfy you and which is going to be necessary for the world. I don't know if I answered your question. Yeah. Okay, everybody. So I look forward to seeing you next week. We'll pick up from there. Have a good evening.